us that you have to sit down and help formulate. You have to sit down and help formulate, because that's what we want. So this is the new role that is emerging of people who believe that change must happen because of this new polity. Similarly, Nikhil did touch upon it very briefly. That's why in the entire Whistleblowers Act, we have a new group of people who are right to information activists who are being killed, who are neither human rights defenders, nor are they inside whistleblowers. They are a whole lot of new people who are being killed periodically, just decimated, because we ask the questions that a whistleblower may or may not ask. But if he is asked, the whistleblower is dismissed, the whistleblower is suspended, or the whistleblower will be transferred, salaries will be stopped. But for a right to information activist or an NREGA activist asking the same question, it's death. So Niyamat Ansari was murdered in Jharkhand because he asked questions in NREGA. Nikhil talked about a worker who was beaten up because he asked questions in NREGA. When you touch anything that's sensitive, you're shot dead or you kill. So the question today is, how do we look at this new polity? And that's why the concern with the Lokpal will be a universal concern. And there may be different ways of looking at it. And then I come to the next issue, which is that if, God forbid, why are there so many political parties? If all of them do the same thing, why don't we have one political party? Why don't we have just one media? Why are we having so many televisions which show you the same thing? Why do we have so many newspapers? We'll have one English newspaper, one regional newspaper, one Hindi newspaper, it's done with. Why do we have so many political newspapers with different kinds of political priorities? Civil society, except for that 1% in government, the rest of us are civil society. From Anil Ambani to Chuni Singh in my village, we are all civil society. How can we all think alike? When you ask one simple question as to whether you think corruption should be eradicated, we'll all say yes. But the moment you say how, we will be divided. Because we see it from our own perspectives. We see it from our own experiences. And that doesn't mean we are corrupt. There have been some simplistic comments made that if you don't agree with me, you are with the enemy. But that is too simplistic. One must understand that this ability to think disparately, plurally, differently is India's strength. And I know that I am very proud of being an Indian because we think so much and think so differently and argue so much. You just have to think of Amartya Sen's book, The Argumentative Indian. We argue about everything. How can we then not argue about an accountability law which is so primary and so overwhelmingly important to me? Of course we'll argue. But argument cannot be seen as inimical. Argument will have to be seen as leading to some kind of cohesion. If the place for dissent and argument is denied, then you get divisive positions. Not demanding that everybody think alike. That I think is not possible. Not this law, not that law, but on anything. From clothes to food to culture to living, we are proud of our plurality, and that's how India will remain one. The question of power. I began with Dev Dungri and with my friends in the village. I honestly see power in them. Very often I've been asked, why did you resign from the IAS? You have left a position of power and you've gone away to live like a poor person. I say to them, I see power in the poor person. Nobody works towards disempowering themselves. I as a woman want my empowerment. I want to live a life in which I can take a decision. I want a life in which I can stand by my decision, and I want a life of equanimity and peace and happiness. If I see power in that ordinary person, I genuinely mean it. I see the power there. I don't see the power in the NEC. I don't see the power in the Prime Minister. I don't see power in the Cabinet. Absolute power, I don't see. There is a kind of power. But this is the land of Gandhiji. We see power in the non-party political process. We see power in the words of truth and conscience. We see power in plurality. Gandhiji disagreed with Netaji, he disagreed with the communists, he disagreed with Ambedkar. All this is in the public domain. And he never said to any of them that he said, I don't agree with you, which he had a right to say. But he never said to any of them that you are with the British. He said, I don't agree because it's not possible. Fair enough. These arguments in the public domain, which were the benchmark of mature politics in India, should not be lost sight of. And today we are getting narrower and narrower in the way we receive each other. All of us do it, and I think we should think about it. The last issue I'd like to talk about, with participatory governance and democracy and fighting corruption, we'll have to have redefinition of leadership. Very often I am asked, oh, there are such few good leaders. I say that you don't look for people, they are there. They are phenomenal people, but we always look for that one big leader. I heard a man called Eduardo Galeano, whom we Indians don't read. But he's a great Spanish political thinker, and he has a huge influence in Europe and in North America. He writes in Spanish, he belongs to Uruguay. I heard him once in a democratic dialogue, which was organized, set of democratic dialogues organized in Barcelona. And I thought he had one of the most beautiful minds. And what did he say? A couple of things he said were so wonderful. He said that democracy is common sense. Democracy is not about specialization. Democracy is about common sense. And he said that no matter what, except for holes drilled by an engineer, which go from top to bottom, all ideas grow organically from bottom to top. There cannot be a superimposed idea. So this trickle-down theory and all these theories don't exist. But he also said that leadership is always collective. He said we create these paper leaders. Then when something goes wrong with them, we say something's wrong with democracy. He says leadership, just look at a flock of birds flying in the air. And you will see they have a V formation. And he called the bird in front the super duck. He said the super duck leads the V formation. But you keep watching it, after a while it gets tired and comes back and another bird goes in front. He said that is natural leadership. Because no leader can be permanently ahead. And if you listen to Gandhi, Gandhiji said if you can't listen and you don't listen to people, you can't lead. I say that if you don't listen, you can't think. All my thoughts are borrowed thoughts. Thoughts I've listened to and imbibed from so many people. So therefore, leadership is shared, it's collective, and it's best when it's shared and collective. And democracy should be shared leadership. That is why I feel that in India we still have an overhang of the feudal concept of leadership. And we have this one leader complex where actually we should think of leadership. I think the Prime Minister should not have a portfolio. I think the Prime Minister should really only look at the way everything's going. There should be a set of cabinet ministers and each ministry must have a separate minister. Why do all our Prime Ministers and Chief Ministers hold so many portfolios? Maybe the Lokpal bill will cure them, because they'll have to hold direct responsibility for every ministry they lead. So maybe it's better for the Prime Minister not to have any ministry, but just be Prime Minister and manage his cabinet. So these are all issues of leadership we must think about. I'm going to end now. And I'm going to end with a favorite quotation from two people. One in Hindi, one in English. I'll quote Lal Singh Ji. Lal Singh is a dismissed constable who is my colleague and comrade. He was asked with other police constables to go and work in the SP's house, the DYSP's house, wash vessels, bathe their children and all, and many of them decided, hum ye nahi karenge. They entered the police to do Rukwali Gasht. We are here to look after the law and order. We are not here to wash all this. So some of them sat on a dharna. And they were all dismissed. Lal Singh Ji was also dismissed. We met Lal Singh Ji in 87. But it so happens that Lal Singh Ji's family was with Mahatma Gandhi in Sabarmati Ashram. I got to know this much later. So Lal Singh Ji's ethics is of a different quality. His family's ethics is of a different quality, and in the village they are known as the ethical family. So any dispute that goes on, no matter who's the sarpanch, they will all come to Lal Singh Ji's family for settlement of the dispute. Now Lal Singh Ji, Nikhil, Shankar and I and Narayan were on a dharna in 1998 in Jaipur. Very cold, bitter January day. Lal Singh Ji wears the dhoti, the safa, the kurta like any peasant. Cold, so he took that dari that they spread, the shamyana and tent house dari, he wrapped himself in it, and we went for the meeting. And whenever we go in droves. People say MKSS never comes alone, it comes in packs. because we feel we are a collective, so we may as well go as a collective, and we share the time. So whatever time they gave us, we shared 10 minutes each, and Lal Singh Ji and Narayan, who's a sarpanch in our village, in our own panchayat, a young boy who grew up with us and who won an election on just 1100 rupees on promise of transparency, we took him also along. Because we were addressing IAS officers and civil service officers on right to information. We finished all our gassing as usual, as I've gassed so long for today, talked, and then by the time Lal Singh Ji's turn came, they said, "Bhai, एक बज गया है, lunch time हो गया है, अब जल्दी अपने बात 3 minutes में कर देना." So he said, "Why 3 minutes? I'll finish it in 1 minute." And let us hear what he said. And he hadn't prepared. Just like Sushila, he had not prepared his speech. He didn't know what he was going to say. These are the people I think we should be guided by in many ways in which we forget to even recognize that they exist. So Lal Singh Ji said, मैं अपनी बात 1 minute में कह दूंगा. हम सोचते हैं कि सूचना का अधिकार नहीं मिले तो क्या हम जिएंगे या नहीं जिएंगे. हम सोचते हैं कि सूचना का अधिकार नहीं मिले तो क्या हम जिएंगे या नहीं जिएंगे. Then he looked towards them and he said, आप सोचते हैं कि सूचना का अधिकार मिल जाए तो आपकी कुर्सी रहेगी या नहीं रहेगी. आप सोचते हैं कि सूचना का अधिकार मिल जाए तो आपकी कुर्सी रहेगी या नहीं रहेगी. मगर दोस्तों, हम सबको मिलकर सोचना होगा कि क्या ये देश रहेगा या नहीं रहेगा. हमको मिलकर सोचना होगा कि यह देश रहेगा या नहीं रहेगा. There are critical moments when all of us have to get together to think कि ये देश रहेगा या नहीं रहेगा, and not in a jingoistic fashion of war, waging war on Pakistan or China or anything else, but to settle our own inner ethical mishaps and differences, to look at the truth as we should see it, with tolerance and compassion, and with equality. Then the future is clearly defined. And I will end by quoting Jeremy Cronin, another great favorite of mine, who is from South Africa, undoubtedly influenced by Mahatma Gandhi, though he is a communist, a poet and writer, who says, what is democracy? Democracy is speaking truth to power. Democracy is speaking truth to power, making truth powerful and power truthful. And that's how I see the way ahead. Thank you very much.
I have a question for Mr. Nikhil Day. You were kind enough to have an exchange with me earlier on during the day, and I'm grateful for that. I have some concern about the comment you made then and the comment that you repeated now about the Lokpal. You suggested that having a monolithic authority, that spans across the entire activities of government would be unwieldy, and the fact that you would then have to set up offices further down the line would expose the organization to local corruption, which we are trying to fight against. Now, you then suggested that whilst the senior bureaucracy and the politicians could have a separate Lokpal, the other bureaucracy, which forms the majority of the bureaucrats in the country, and which really caters for the ordinary man and his grievances, that should be an appellate body. It should not replace the existing machinery. Now, I have very serious concerns about your suggestion, and I'll be very grateful if you think about that matter. Because, let me give an example. Suppose there is a false complaint registered against me in the police. And let us assume that the policeman who's investigating the complaint teams up with the guy or the woman who has made a complaint against me. Do you seriously think that I will get any joy from proceeding with the police machinery in order to rectify the situation? If there were a Lokpal that was quite independent of that machinery, I'm much more likely to go to them, whereas if I'm impaled or otherwise harassed by the police, I'm more likely to succumb. And I therefore feel that your suggestion of having a Lokpal as an appellate body is flawed. Now, I respectfully suggest, you also went on to say that the other defect in having a Lokpal all the way down is that the units become too small. Now, I mean, you know economics, I hope you know economics, and you know that the size of a unit can be dictated by you don't have to have an organization at every village. You can have an organization that is consistent with efficacy, which is consistent with being able to deliver justice, but which still is independent of the existing machinery. I would therefore urge you with great respect to rethink your stand on the subject and line up with the Anna team on that subject.
Yeah, no. I think let's take both the issues separately. The first is the first issue about the appellate body. The reason for that, and this is something we should all consider, if we say that we want an equal number of people, and one of the things when we are discussing the Lokpal, all of us need to discuss it, debate it, understand it. How many investigating officers are we thinking of? To give you a figure, the CBI today, which is our premier investigating agency, and it has problems with it because of controls and various aspects, has 6,000 officers. And the CBI today, every year, deals with 1,000 cases. Now, the numbers of people who we are talking about, if we are saying we are going to have a new independent investigating agency, with the kinds of complaints that are going to come our way, are phenomenal. When we dealt with the Right to Information Act, one of the big criticisms on us that was thrown our way was that you're going to talk about a huge bureaucracy, a new huge bureaucracy. One of the change, the term is used very often now, game changers, or one of the things that really worked was we said no new bureaucracy. The only thing we are saying is set up information commissions in every state, which is new, that's true, but it's tiny compared to a new bureaucracy. It's just 4 people. Here in Goa, for instance, it's just 1 commissioner with his very tiny staff, very squeezed. But the fact that this information commission will have the power to penalize and look over everyone who belongs to that same office, an existing bureaucrat, actually with a vested interest against, again, the PIO. One PIO in every office who does not want to part with information normally. But why does that PIO part with it? Because he knows down the line, 1 month, 2 months from now, an information commissioner, the appeal may go after first appellate authority to the information commissioner, and he may get fined from his own pocket. So it's a mechanism. I'm not saying it's perfect, and I'm not saying any of these are perfect, and I'm not saying we have a perfect solution. But it's a mechanism that actually has worked, and there are 2 places where we've suggested it within this formulation. One is with the lower bureaucracy, because actually we have to get our systems to work. We have a huge police force. Somewhere that police force has to work. It has to work in murder, it has to work in robbery, it has to work in our day-to-day functioning. We have anti-corruption bureaus in many states. Somewhere we have to get them to work. And actually the police was originally set up to be an independent agency. Police is not with every department. It's not with every, it's supposed to be. The only thing is it's come under the political dispensation. And therefore it is true, as we heard today also in our session, that the police has to answer all the time to the political establishment. But if the police has to answer to an independent agency for corruption, if the Anti-Corruption Bureau has to answer to an independent agency and be taken to task if strictures can be passed against it for not having followed what it should have followed, the way it should have followed it, then perhaps our idea is, without setting up a huge new bureaucracy, you may actually get it to work. May not. I'm not saying...
It hasn't done so.
It hasn't done so today for 2 reasons. The whole basis, and I think later on we'll discuss it more, and maybe we'll come, because it's not that this argument has been made, and you may well be right, I may well be wrong, I'm not saying that. I do say it with a certain amount of thought that's gone on, and discussion that's gone on amongst many, many people in this respect. And there is no doubt that if you don't have this, you have no alternative but a huge new investigating officers police force. And whether that new, and that brings us to the second question which you raised, which is that the decentralized delegated authority does not, from what I understood it, you said, does not necessarily have to be corrupt. It can be also efficacious, even though it's decentralized and delegated. See, firstly, you will have to have certain amount of delegated authorities, because if I have a constable or a patwari or a babu taking a bribe from me, I have to have an office close by where I can go and file my complaint. Now, if I can't file my complaint either in the local thana or in an anti-corruption bureau close by, I will have to have a new Lokpal authority where I will file that complaint. One big idea, and a very important idea, and we have certainly full agreement with it, that in investigating processes, the whole idea is that you do not go to the very same office to ask for relief which has caused you the grief in the first place. So you do not go for investigation to that same office. We agree with that. And both in grievances and in this, we built that in and woven it in. But if you have that police force, there is oversight elsewhere, we feel that you bring in that element of independence, we feel. If you don't, if you have this current structure of independence, that does not solve all the problems of corruption within our society that actually infects every single body, even the independent bodies. Because some part of our corruption comes from lack of independence. A large part of our corruption comes from the misuse of power by everyone, by NGOs, by police, by administration, by media, by politicians, by business, by the private sector. It is where you have power, many of those people misuse power. And where I would say that is, if I look at my local thanedar, not just mine today, but as a rule, there is almost no thana that does not take money and have a whole system that it gives here and there. About 10% of its cases would be influenced by a high official or by a politician saying, do so-and-so job. There are those 10% cases, and that is certainly because of lack of independence. But there are 90% of its corruption cases where there is a system of extraction based on the power that they wield. It's something that if you put someone else in their place, it is that every single one of those officers are making money for themselves. There remains still a very big danger that office empowered in that area will also be infected similarly. And I don't know how and where either I or anyone else could get the sense of confidence that that office will suddenly be born of some other material and not be infected in that fashion. So it's something we need to think about, both ways.
The first is that you spoke about the 99% civil society that is there in India. I'm sure that each of these 99% wants a better India. But then we have a new debate that is emerging, that is that my civil society is stronger than your civil society. Because some people say that NEC has the blessings of Sonia Gandhi ji and that's why it is powerful, and other civil society organizations do not get the same hearing from the government because they are not part of the NEC. So how do you look at this debate that is emerging? And secondly, yesterday we had a double speak from the Prime Minister in the same speech about RTI. So how do you look at it?
I don't think there is an argument about my civil society and your civil society. There is no such thing. I think I'm part of many groups of civil society.